I've spoke to both Ridgid and Delta, and they both have told me that this is the same saw as the Delta Cruzer, that it's made in the same factory by the same company, and even the part numbers are the same on many of the non-orange or blue parts. I had purchased both the 10-inch model and the 12-inch model and was going to see if there was any difference in them. I've got 4 things that I really like about this saw. I've got 2 things that I do not like. So both of these saws are basically identical except for the size of the blade and the reach. So all the features are the same. So I'm not going to go into each saw because unless I specifically identify this is a 10 or 12 inch, it's going to be the same on both saws. The only thing other than the length that the saw will reach and the size of the blade that I have found that is slightly different is the color of the LED for the shadow line, which operates perfectly for both of them. It's just they used a different Kelvin LED, it looks like. Okay, what everybody's looking at with this saw is these articulating arms, and because they are sealed bearings, you don't have any noise whatsoever. It's completely silent and completely smooth, whereas the typical sliding miter saw, you're running on the tubes, and you can feel the metal bearing against the metal rail. So these things are buttery smooth, as Matt says. If you've never owned a saw with a shadow line, then you don't know what you're missing, because I didn't. Now that I've had one with a shadow line, I will never own another saw without a shadow line. You can actually see exactly where the blade is going because it is a shadow of the blade. It's not like a laser, so there's never any calibration. The shadow is always going to be perfectly the width. So if you go between a full kerf or a thin kerf blade, it does not matter. Your shadow is going to be appropriate to the size of the blade. And as in here, you can even see the carbides of the teeth. Because of the actuating arms, the saw can sit flush up against the wall, which saves 12 inches of room compared to my other miter saw that had the tubes. So when we're up against the wall, we were looking at about a 29.5 inch out for the 10 inch and about 30.5 inches for the 12 inch model. This saw has the standard 10 detents on your most common angles. You press the button down and it rotates, and then it'll lock into the closest detent. If you want to bypass that, you can press this button down here, and then it can free go past the detents. You can set it to whatever angle you want, a quarter turn, and it's locked. It's not going anywhere. It's very easy to turn, but yet it's very secure. Beveling this saw has some really good features and some not so great features. So right here, you lift this up, you have to reach behind the saw and take out the detents, and then you can rotate your saw left and right, 45 degrees either way, and then you push this back down and the saw is locked. Now something's really nice is that there are 7 detents on your 7 most common bevels, so that when you push this back and you rotate, it will lock into the closest detent. But you do have to reach around behind the saw to undo it, and then you got to reach back and redeploy your locking pin. What I do not like is primarily on the 12 inch, it's not near about as bad on the 10 inch, but whenever you press the trigger, the saw jumps. So it does have a real hard kind of kickback. Even if I sit there and purposely try to hold it, I mean, it can only go straight up and down perpendicular, but when you're trying to get right up here on a precision cut, you know, I don't like the feel of a saw jumping. I like to be in 100% control anytime I'm working with any type of piece of machinery. So maybe we'll put a 5th thing that I really like is this trigger. Right here, this is your safety. You cannot pull your actual power without the safety being pulled. You can come over here as primarily, as all miter saws are, for right hand, but you can come in here and grab this with your left hand and still be able to pull this with the left or right hand. One thing that I find, if you carry this saw around a lot, when you reach in here, I can't get my hand, I've got a big hand, but I can't get my hand on the handle with the dust collection angle right here. So you could always take this off and it opens up the room. But if you're using dust collection, you have to actually go get a screwdriver to remove this. If we're talking best to worst in dust collection, this would be about a 7.5. It's better than average, so 5 would be average and 10 would be the best. Capex for $1,500 would be about a 9, and again, this would be about a 7.5 for a third of the price. It has the small little flap here that helps direct some of the wood up. I find if you have just a regular shop vac connected to the saw, it does not catch but maybe 50–60% of the wood shavings. I have a dust collection system, and with the dust collection system connected, I probably get 75–80% or better. So for me, the dust collection on this saw is very good for a miter saw. For me, I buy this saw because I want an accurate cut. If not, I would be on the ground with a skill saw. So that is the most important factor for me. The way I measure is I don't worry about trying to get my angle of the blade with the bed. I get a piece of wood. I'm going to put it up here tight, make sure I got a straight edge. I'm going to cut it. Then I'm going to measure my angle on the piece of wood and see if I'm actually getting the proper angle to the wood, because I can measure my bed and my blade, but if I have any kind of blade wobble or a bent spindle or something, that can change, and I want to see how well the saw cuts. What I also will do is I will put a board in here. I'll get as tall as board as I can fit, and I cut down, and then I measure this angle. Then I'm going to do my bevels. I will reach back here, do my board, cut it, measure this angle. That way I can make sure that my detents are locking in the proper angle. And once again, out of both saws, there was one of them that the bevel back here, this back plate, was off by 0.2 degrees, which is more than what you want to cut at, but it's not unheard of. I've had many saws that I bought new out of the box that had way more deviation. It's got a very thorough step-by-step instructions on how to square up the saw if there is any deviations. And when I did call in to the telephone number on the box, which is a different telephone number that is than it was in the book. So that number on the box is the people who really want to help you, because they don't want you to take the saw back to the store, and was very helpful. Blade deviation. There's been a lot of YouTubers out here that were talking about how far you can deviate this blade by pushing it to the side. None of them have given me factual numbers. So I did a little experiment. I placed my blade all the way into the down position, locked it. I placed a dial indicator up against my blade, dead center, about 1 inch up from the table. And then I also set a scale, digital scale, pull scale, and cranked it up, slowly increased until I got 5 pounds of lateral pressure. With these saws, both of them, even though Delta and Ridgid both, when I asked, they said there's no standard deviation, they both came out at 32 thousandths of an inch. Now, I checked my other brand miter saw that I use. It had 16 thousandths of an inch. So we're talking almost twice the deviation. However, when I broke that down into a fraction, this is 1/32 of an inch at our full extension compared to 1/64 of an inch, which is not as accurate as you should be. But however, this saw, I probably only have to use 2 to 3 pounds of force to make my cut. So I should not be using 5 pounds of lateral force sideways against the blade whenever I am making that cut. So for what I seem to find with this saw is that it does cut accurately, which is again what is most important to me. When I put my board down here, I want to come down and be able to push this back. And when I'm pushing up through even thicker lumber, I am not pushing sideways. And on this particular saw, I measured some thick lumber, doing all kinds of angles, and I did not have any issues with accuracy. So one thing I did find is I went to make a little end table here, and while this saw, you read on the box, it cuts a 2x14, you know, with the extended table and all this, it all says nominal. So basically they're taking construction lumber and subtracting a 1/2 inch off of the measurements. And then in some places it will have the actual measurements, and in some places it does not list the actual measurement. One of them is on the bevel. So I went to cut this board here, and I needed to put 45 bevels on the ends. And so once again, I'm thinking this saw is great because it's got our bevel features, which is better than most. And I can put this down here and I can go ahead and cut this board. But whenever I went to come out, if you see here, see the board's moving? Well, this is 1 7/8 inches. This is too thick of a board to be cut. Now, if the board was smaller, you know, it will come all the way out. And but whenever you're getting closer to the capacity of the saw, these articulating arms, when they're beveled down, you only have about 1.5 inches clearance. So you can bevel a construction grade 2x4, but you cannot bevel a 2-inch board with the 12-inch saw. Now the 10-inch and the 12 have the same articulating arms, and so the tolerances on the bevel are the same. All right, so that's the end of it for my review. It's a lot shorter than most of my reviews. I'm trying to stop rambling so much and get these reviews down a little shorter. If you like that, please let me know in the comments, or if you like some of my older reviews that are more detailed, because when I make a purchase, I like to know all the little features and functions so I can make the best choice, because I'm looking for the best value for my money, and not always is the most expensive tool the best for my use and my needs. Sometimes you're paying for features that you'll never use, or the saw may not function as good in certain situations such as this. It works great for small bevels up to 1 inch, 1.5 inches, but if you do anything up to 1 7/8 inches like this board here, you know, a 12-inch saw can't bevel a 2-inch board. However, if you never bevel 2-inch boards, this could be a great saw for you. So just put it down in the comments if there's something else, if you own one of these saws and you're watching, that you see that may or may not be a good function for somebody. Put it down in the comments. It helps other people out whenever they're making their purchase. And if you want, subscribe. It definitely helps the videos out, and give me a thumbs up, and it's certainly appreciated. Thank you.